I'm Sam, PhD student in intellectual history, looking at political faction. This year I've been looking at Rapin de Thoyras, a Huguenot refugee who first fled to the Netherlands, then to Britain, and then ultimately back to Germany, but we'll go through that now. And his contributions as this outsider to the British political system, and what analysis he brings as a foothill in intellectual history, perhaps not a mountain, and maybe why he should be integrated into the canon of intellectual history further than he already is. So he starts off, I thought this was a good hook, in reference to the English political system. It would therefore be in vain to pretend to describe this government by the usual names of monarchy, aristocracy, or democracy, which agree not with it, in his dissertation on the Whigs and Tories, early 18th century, 1717. So this raises a few questions. If England is neither monarchy, aristocracy, nor democracy, what kind of political order is it? How does this mixed and indeterminate constitution generate party rather than suppress it? Why does such a system require opposition, balance, and moderation to function? And can party be understood as a failure of the constitution, but as its necessary expression? My methodology quickly, I draw quite a lot on the reading of Dominic with Capra, treating Rapin's life as a text, analysing how biography informs intellectual response. The Capra argues in his Rethinking Intellectual History that the text of life itself is written in a better way than conventional texts. This means that biography is not background context, but an active site of meaning making. In Lacanian terms, it is therefore crucial to engage with less formalised modes of discourse and written or lived texts. Methodologically, this includes letters and the tutoring relationships that we'll see in the Grand Tour that Rapin takes on, emotional and psychological responses to these moments, lived experiences of exile, education, and political service. This approach allows Rapin's ideas on party, moderation, and constitutional balance to be read as historically situated intellectual responses and not just the abstract theory on its own. So his intellectual formation, exile, confession, and political sensibility in the late 17th century. Rapin de Thoyras was born in 1661 into a Huguenot legalist family in Castile, a former Protestant stronghold with a history of resistance to royal authority. It became an independent republic 100 years before Rapin de Thoyras was born. Early exposure to law, confessional conflict, and minority status shaped his sensitivity to power and persecution. The revocation of the Edict of Nantes in 1685, which also coincided with his father dying, forced him into exile at the age of 24. This experience of displacement and enforced conformity fostered lasting hostility to absolutism and religious uniformity. He had a military and political formation by entering the service of William III via Huguenot networks, including his brother, who was a captain in the Dutch army. He participated in major events of the Glorious Revolution, particularly in Ireland, the Boyne and Limerick. First-hand exposure to constitutional monarchy versus absolutism that he saw in France. Protestant internationalism through the networks that he created across borders in the lowlands. And the political consequences of confessional rule. Moving on, his formation continued with education, observation, and the emerging Republic of Letters. He took part in what is known as the Grand Tour between 1701 and 1703. He was a tutor to Henry Bentinck, the son of a leading Anglo-Dutch statesman, the Earl Bentinck, and he travels across Germany and Italy, which functioned as a laboratory for comparative political observation. Training in elite sociability, diplomacy, he went with the Earl to Paris to try and negotiate certain peace deals in secret, and historical reflection. His pedagogy based on moderation, affection, and moral responsibility rather than strict discipline. He says, I would like to act with him as a friend to friend or brother to brother, not acting by way of order and command, but by way of advice and counsel. In a word, I would treat him with so much cordiality and attachment to his little interests that if there was any way, he would be the first to believe that he was nowhere as good as with me. These are in the memoirs of a friend of Rapin's. And he sort of is forced into this life of patronage very quickly, and he falls out with the Bentinck family ultimately, actually a family related to the Duke of Buckingham, who he sees as many of the roots of all our ills in English society, as he writes in the dissertation. Persistent financial insecurity sharpened his critique of favouritism and court politics, again a recurring theme in his actual works that he is immersed in himself in his life. But he also in this time embeds further in the Huguenot intellectual networks, such figures as Leclerc, who will assist him when he moves to Wesel in Germany, Baud, and the broader Republic of Letters. His settlement in Wesel provided stability, marrying a rich wife, and access to transnational debates in these border towns. A formation of a distinctive method, history as political education, party as a structural feature of constitutional government, extremism, Whig or Tory, as a threat to stability. So, one of the themes that I've looked at in my research is how he interprets the roots of party in England. In the dissertation of 1717, he approaches English party conflict as a historian rather than a partisan, insisting that politics must be read through historical development. Early 18th century England sees history writing become a key arena of political identity, especially in Whig and Tory debates. The expansion of print culture at this time and self-improving middling sorts in terms of readership creates demand for large-scale national histories. Just previously, Lawrence Eschard had published a cornerstone of reading English history in the 18th century. Historical knowledge is understood as moral instruction, political education, and a defence against civil and confessional regression. Influenced by Leclerc, Rapin treats history as a means of promoting humanity, reciprocity, and judgment. For Rapin, party is not a modern corruption, but a historically produced phenomenon rooted in England's past. So further, Reformation, Civil War, and the consolidation of party, Rapin locates the origins of party in the English Reformation, where religious allegiance becomes inseparable from political identity. The dissolution of the monasteries and Henry VIII's restraint toward Parliament foster early constitutional consciousness. He writes that some kings, as Henry VIII, did what they pleased, but without any prejudice to the privileges of Parliament. This, by the way, is the best and perhaps the only method for a king to render himself powerful and easy. Easy at this time could have meant easy in terms of finances, that he will remain with a fund, the king, but it could also just mean an easy life. We don't know exactly. But civil war, conflict, moving on in history, for Rapin, produces layered factionism, Presbyterians and independents, moderates and radicals within both church and state. These confessional and ideological divisions persist throughout and beyond 1649, hardening into Whig and Tory identities after 1688. Rapin distinguishes moderate constitutional actors from extremist factions, Jacobite high flyers, he calls them, and residual Republicans from the good old cause. His central claim, party conflict is enduring, but political stability depends on moderation within a mixed constitution. How am I doing time-wise?
About halfway through.
Halfway through, okay. Rapin defines party, in terms of the nature of party, as a necessary feature of liberty, not a pathological corruption of politics. In the epistle dedicatory to George I, when he writes the history, he argues that the union of Crown and Parliament is the foundation of political stability. He rejects both monarchical absolutism and parliamentary excess. In the dissertation, party is analysed as inevitable, potentially destabilising, yet essential to the mixed constitution. His History of England, which he wrote in 1723 and 1724, is slightly complex because he'd moved to Wesel, he's sending manuscripts to The Hague, so we don't know exactly when certain bits were written, but it also contains the previously written and focuses around the dissertation, a much shorter text integrated into the history. Translates this analysis into narrative, showing that moderation, consensus, and constructive criticism preserve the state. Civil discourse should advance the common good rather than entrench factional dominance. Party disagreement strengthens the polity when conducted within constitutional bounds. Rapin also historicises faction, arguing that party division is rooted in England's confessional and constitutional history. It's not a post-1688 aberration. Instead of the anarchy and confusion intended by the abdication of James II, the government is a settled one, on more solid and lasting foundations. Whigs and Tories represent enduring differences. Whigs, parliamentary liberty, commerce, religious toleration; Tories, monarchy, Anglican establishment, social order. Political allegiance is reinforced by religious identity, making party persistent and self-renewing. Rapin condemns extremes on both sides, Jacobite high Tories, the residual Whig Republicans, and defends alternation in power and loyal opposition as constitutional safeguards. His central claim is that faction cannot be eliminated, but moderated party competition is the guarantor of English liberty. So the function of party. For Rapin, the function of party is not domination, but constitutional maintenance. Parties act as a check on arbitrary monarchy, unrestrained parliamentary power. There's a historical experience of the Reformation, the Civil War, 1688, and it shows that unchecked authority can produce tyranny or anarchy. Party enables reform without revolution. The Whig constitutional reforms after 1715 and the Rising lead to the Septennial Act in 1716. Opposition is legitimate when lawful, moderate, oriented towards preserving the constitution. Party thus serves as a preventative mechanism, avoiding both absolutism and regicide. The function of party publication and political education. Rapin understands party as functioning within an expanded public sphere, print culture, pamphlets, circulating libraries. His dissertation and histoire explain party to English readers, continental audiences unfamiliar with parliamentary government, and it's important to note that both the dissertation and the histoire were first published in French, then into other European languages, German, Dutch, before they were published in English. This was much more important to hold a mirror up to absolutist governments on the continent. Party performs an educational role, clarifying interests, structuring disagreement, channeling passion into debate rather than violence. Rival parties represent ideas and principles, not fixed class conflict. Harmonious discord between moderate Whigs and Tories sustains liberty. That's a passage from Hugh Trevor-Roper, writing on Rapin as a Huguenot historian. An awareness of the radical elements, those who maybe imagined the nation might be governed without a parliament, and those who thought that the parliament should, as I may say, govern without a king. For Rapin, faction is inevitable, but moderated party competition is how free states function. Rapin died of exhaustion on the 25th of May, 1725, and this is my last slide, so I hope none of you die of exhaustion. But what did he contribute, and why should he be integrated? He would conceptualise party as a constitutional necessity rather than a political pathology, historicising faction as an enduring product of England's mixed government, confessional pluralism, and social diversity, and thereby laying early groundwork for later theories of the loyal opposition and pluralism. He fused history writing with political theory in a way that reshaped 18th century historiography, using narrative moderation and probabilistic reasoning to restore history's authority as magistra vitae at a moment when abstract philosophy and the exact sciences threatened to eclipse it. He acted as a crucial mediator between English and continental political thought, translating the English constitutional experience for a European audience and profoundly influencing other figures such as Montesquieu and Hume. Voltaire comments on him, Burke comments on him, and Bolingbroke ultimately uses a lot of his history to then write his own ideas of the Patriot King. But Rapin still sits as an underappreciated figure, and I do hope that we can see that he makes a valuable contribution to the canon of intellectual history. Thank you.